Today we are continuing the conversation about Ancestry, and well, this time we're talking about Ancestry.com StoryScout and how to properly put names into profiles. You know, things like whether to put question marks or quotes, you know, are those appropriate? And then there are some tips about source citations and, well, how to get them in there the easy way. Now, if this is your first time here, my name is Connie Knox. I am a lifelong genealogist here to help you go further, faster, and factually with your family history research. Now, this is a footnotes episode, and I like to call them footnotes because it's in the footnotes where the real sources are, and today's real source is Ancestry's own Crista Cowan. She is the Barefoot Genealogist and Ancestry's corporate genealogist. She is one of my favorite go-to people who is in the know, and so let's get some answers to our questions. Well, let's talk about StoryScout for a minute. I have noticed in my own little StoryScout that it's starting to get more robust. Are you guys continuing to add more information?
Absolutely. Yeah. StoryScout, we have a team working on it. Actually, several teams in content and research, constantly adding stories and making family connections, building out family trees of some of the more notable, we call them notables, notable people throughout history. So that people can make those discoveries and find those stories.
Well, tell me, how exactly is that information pulled together? I know that you guys are kind of creating snippets of history, and then I'm assuming you're pulling data out of the ancestor profiles and stuff and going, okay, this person lived in Ohio in the 1920s, so let's apply this piece of history to it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's, right. You know, when you're dealing with so many people coming to the site every day, and StoryScout was primarily designed for new people to help them kind of get that spark of
get excited, yeah,
story, right? We have to create some kind of computer algorithm that helps us determine that. And so, yeah, as long as you give us, like for new people, we ask them to tell us the names of their grandparent or great-grandparent who was born before 1940. And based on that, we then go out and search other trees to see if anybody has put this person in their tree so that we can see what connections we can make. If they haven't, we look, like you said, based on place and time to see what stories we can serve up that we've put together from that location.
All right, let's talk about names and the fact field called names. So, and I've had a ton of questions about this. All right, so with regard to names, do the question marks that people put in their name. So let's say they say Robert, quote, Bobby, and then their last name, does that hurt the algorithm?
Technically, yes, it does. So anytime you put any character in the name fields other than actual letters, then it's going to cause the algorithm to look at other things. And typically that is because those characters have meaning in computer language that is different than just an alphabet, right? So for example, on Ancestry, an asterisk and a question mark are wildcards, which means if you have those anywhere in the name field for whatever reason, you're going to get probably some pretty wild search results or hints, because that's how the computer reads that particular character.
Thank you. This is what I've been trying to reinforce for a while, and so it's good to hear from you on that. So I also am trying to emphasize with people, if you're not sure about a name and you put Bobby question mark in there, that's not cool, right? Yeah. I mean, that's not going to help any. It's only probably going to make things worse,
right?
As far as the search goes. So any of those characters we don't want in there. We don't want hashtags. We don't want. All right, so let's talk about what do we do if we have a nickname, for example. Do we want to use the alternate names, or do we want to use also known as?
I think personally, I feel like that's a personal choice. Okay. However, those two things are treated a little differently again by the Ancestry search algorithms. So if you enter something as an alternate name, that is taken into account when you do searches. And so typically I use the also known as field, not for nicknames, but for things like when someone actually changes their name. So I do a lot of Jewish immigration research. That's my research specialty. And one of the things that I've learned is that you've got somebody who was born with, a Russian Hebrew name, and then they come to the United States and they change both their given name and sometimes their surname to a similar but very different name. And so I would put that as an alternate name. Same thing if you're dealing with somebody who has gone through sex change and they've changed, like completely changed their name, right?
So would you use that as an alternate name, or
I would use that as an alternate name. Yep.
Okay.
So then for me, I use the also known as for the nicknames that I just personally want to keep track of in that facts field.
Okay.
Most nicknames, not all, but most nicknames, Ancestry already has built into our name authority dictionary that we use to perform searches. So for example, Robert, right? Under Robert, we would have Rob and Robbie and Bob and Bobby and all the variant spellings of those things, and probably a dozen others that you haven't even thought of yet that we search when we do that search.
Yeah, so also, I want to think, if I recall, I was just trying to look real quick. Alternate names show right up underneath the name and gender section, but also known as, doesn't that populate at the bottom?
Yes, so alternate names will show up at the top of the facts column, and then also known as will be alphabetized with the other facts that are non-date based.
I know that one of the big bugaboos that for myself and for other people is if you have your own source and you're trying to build a source citation in the Ancestry platform, it can be a little challenging to figure out, okay, wait a minute. Like maybe it's a biography that I wrote. Okay, so we got to figure out the repository. We got to figure out all this other stuff. Do you have the time to give us a walkthrough on how we would do that?
You know what? I can give you a couple of tips that might help.
Okay.
The first one is, and this is more for new people, but I think also some of us who are a little more experienced can get overwhelmed with that as well. Keep it simple, right? You do not have to fill in every single field just because a field exists. And so I think when people are creating their own source in their Ancestry tree, we provide them with that source wizard that we created years ago based off of the work of Elizabeth Shown Mills and Evidence Explained. And it asks for every piece of possible information. And sometimes information just either doesn't exist or we don't have it readily available. So keep it as simple as possible. That's my first tip. My second tip is around personal sources. Like in your example, a biography usually is published. And so there's some publication information, even if it hasn't been distributed. So it might not have a repository because there's been no distribution, but there should still be publication information. Most other personal information, again,
like a journal or something.
Skip all that, right? Because yeah, it's about personal knowledge. And I would just always direct people, always to Elizabeth's website, which is evidenceexplained.com. And she's got some quick models there specifically for citing personal knowledge.
Yeah. Thank you. I can write, source citations in my sleep now, but it is, no offense, a little challenging on the Ancestry site sometimes. Yeah. It's just time consuming. And it's just I would rather just write the source citation myself and plug it into the comment section or something, or in one of the fields there. But
and I'll tell you my dirty little secret. I just put them in my notes.
Yeah, me too.
If I don't want to take the time to actually craft a well-done source citation, I will just put it into my notes using one of those quick models, usually just copy and paste and then fill in my own information.
Well, and a lot of times when if you have to manually create a source citation like that, might as well write it out anyway, because I advocate for creating detailed research notes anyway, so you're going to want it in there anyway. So
you and me both, sister.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time today, and I think you managed to get every one of my questions answered. So.
Oh, good. Anytime. It's always delightful.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Crista, for the interview and all the answers to all of our questions. We really appreciate it. There are more videos on the screen now for your binge watching pleasure. And well, it is time to say goodbye. So until next time, keep on climbing your family tree.